But Luke's a great guy. I'm excited to invite him up on stage, and he's going to talk about how to help clients to get 70% more Bitcoin in less than 12 months. So, welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Wyatt. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm from Michigan, so I'm not a local. I know a lot of other people here are not locals as well, and so it's nice to meet so many new faces, see old faces, and I'm just really glad you're all here. Thanks for sticking out to the last presentation today, and I'll try to keep it as information-packed as possible. So, why did I title the presentation this? It's because it's what gets people excited. People here, as we all know, are CPAs, accountants, wealth advisors, asset protection lawyers, all kinds of things here. And in my experience, having worked with a lot of people over the years in Bitcoin, the thing that gets them the most excited is, how do I get more Bitcoin? Yeah, asset protection, yeah, multi-sig, yeah, inheritance planning when I die someday, whatever. How do I get more Bitcoin? That's the thing that gets everybody excited. And so that's going to be the frame of reference that I'm talking about today. So a little bit about me, for those of you that don't know who I am. My name is Luke Broyles. I am from Michigan, so similar weather to here this time of year. I was the first American at the Bitcoin Advisor team. For those of you that are not aware of what the Bitcoin Advisor is the Bitcoin Advisor is a collective of Bitcoin-only individuals that help ourselves and clients increase their Bitcoin stack, primarily by protecting and securing what they have. So since 2016, we've been helping people in a professional sense secure their Bitcoin. Obviously, we've always been self-custody advocates, not universally, but that's always the direction we want to trend towards. At the time of this presentation recording, we're helping clients manage approximately $1 billion of assets, 500 clients in over, I think, 20, 25 countries around the world. Obviously, the vast majority being the United States, Australia, the UK, and Canada. We got over 40 team members on our team now. I'm still the youngest on the team. That probably won't be true forever, but it is true right now. And my favorite stat of all is that our average client, when they come to us within 12 months, they have an average increase about 70% of their Bitcoin stack. Not the dollar value of their Bitcoin, but the Bitcoin stack itself. Now that's an average, and as all of us math nerds know, an average is skewed a bit to the upside. So some people that come to us, we help them double or triple their stack. Other people, it's only 20, 30% increase, but whatever the case, our goal is help everybody increase the Bitcoin stack, because that's the most important thing of all. Asset protection, self-custody, inheritance, all the other stuff is on the presupposition that you have Bitcoin to protect in the first place. So what am I going to talk about specifically in today's presentation? I'm going to explain, or I'm going to give my opinion, and it's just my opinion, but I'm going to give my opinion what I think the number one key thing is that's the most important than anything else when it comes to your Bitcoin. I'm going to give the 3 viable options for holding Bitcoin in the long term, which is going to be stupid simple, but it needs to be said both for everybody in this room and also for when having the conversation with your own clients. This is something that's very useful to me when having the conversation with others. The trade-offs of the 3 business models in Bitcoin asset protection, why we encourage Bitcoin self-custody, and more importantly, what we specifically do with that. Why I think multi-sig is the future, which I know we've had many panels over today and yesterday talking about multi-sig, collateral custody, asset protection, all that. So I'll try to keep that a little bit more minimal since I think we have a bit more education there. And then, of course, everybody's favorite, the best ways to get more Bitcoin. So the number one crucial key that so many people, especially people that are newer to Bitcoin, I think they miss is that the number one most important crucial key when it comes to protecting your Bitcoin and increasing your Bitcoin stack is knowledge. I meet so many people all the time that have a zero-sum mindset that are trying to pick up pennies in front of a steamroller. And it's a very frequent thought experiment I present to people. Basically, me saying, hey, would you rather me give you $10 million and send you back in time to 2009, or would you rather me not give you the $10 million and you travel back in time with the knowledge of what Bitcoin is? The knowledge that we all have here is worth millions and millions of dollars. Would you rather have $1 billion of Bitcoin and not know how to protect it properly, or $1 million of Bitcoin and know how to protect it properly, right? If you don't have the knowledge, you are going to lose the Bitcoin. And I see this in so many conversations with people, and frankly, sometimes, unfortunately, if people don't necessarily take that advice, bad things can happen. But the point is that even though it's intangible, it doesn't mean it's without value, and that is the single most important thing, which is kind of obvious saying, but it's true. And so therefore, if knowledge is more valuable than the money itself, the number one expense is always opportunity cost. Sure, it costs money to protect your Bitcoin properly. Sure, it costs money when you buy or sell Bitcoin on exchange. I see this all the time where, especially for new people, they're like, oh, well, I got to pay a 1% fee on an exchange. I'm going to wait and, do it later. And, I'm going to try to do some more research or whatever, right? And it's like people don't understand that Bitcoin moves a couple of percent a day, right? Like it doesn't matter if exchange 1 is 1.5%, exchange 2 is 1.3%, right? It's like you're picking up pennies in front of a steamroller. Your number one cost is not buying Bitcoin before it goes up in price, right? So I think we can see that on a microcosm. I think it's also important to recognize on a macrocosm. Your number one cost is not necessarily your tax bill, it's not necessarily the mortgage, it's not necessarily your grocery bill. Your number one cost is the lack of knowledge and how to increase your Bitcoin stack as fast as possible, which for me is why I personally joined the Bitcoin Advisor team years ago, because I recognize that for myself, that I can work as hard as I can to increase my income, but at the end of the day, we need to find as many new ways as possible to do that. So, the 3 viable options: if knowledge is more important than the money, and if, therefore, opportunity cost is always our greatest opportunity cost. And if I could add one more thing to quote everyone's favorite Bitcoin evangelist, Michael Saylor, I think the perfect example of this, frankly, not to pick on them too much, but is Coinbase versus MicroStrategy, right? Coinbase, they had many more years than MicroStrategy to be stacking Bitcoin. And they were holding Bitcoin for many years more, right? They had a way larger user base. They had a higher company valuation. But now here we are. MicroStrategy has multiples upon multiples more Bitcoin than Coinbase did. Why? Because Michael Saylor understood the cost of opportunity cost, and he had the proper knowledge that Bitcoin's the money, not the gambling casino. He had the right knowledge of his background, and of course, now he's sitting on a lot more Bitcoin than Coinbase is, America's overwhelmingly dominant crypto casino. So, there are only, did I say that? So there are only 3 viable options for every single person in this room, for every single one of our clients, for every single person that's watching this online, for every single person in Bitcoin. These are the only 3 options that we have to choose from for long-term wealth planning. I know once I say it, it might sound a bit obvious, but so many times I have this conversation with people and they just haven't thought this through. A lot of people, their biggest concern is, how do I get Bitcoin on the cheap? Should I buy now? How much should I buy? When can I retire? All that kind of stuff. But when they bought Bitcoin and Bitcoin goes up, they grow into a new wealth level. And frankly, most people, this is a very good problem, right? You've added another 0 or 2 onto your net worth in terms of dollars, in terms of political currency. But people haven't really reflected on, I need to keep this safe into the long term. People that have never had $1 million, let alone $10 million, have had to deal with the trade-offs and consequences of having that level of wealth. So really, there's only 3 options here. The first option is that you can put in the time. If you want to be somebody that buys 1 Bitcoin at $1,000 or $10,000 or $100,000 and rides it to the moon or rides it to Valhalla with Michael Saylor or whatever, and it's going to $1 bajillion a coin or whatever, if you really believe it's going to happen, then and you don't want to pay for anything, then you're going to have to figure out how on your own to become an expert in everything self-custody, everything with protecting that. You're going to have to become an expert on how to help your family that doesn't necessarily want to become an expert in that figure it out. You're going to have to become an expert legally, with the tax code if you want to protect your assets against taxes, with lawfare or lawsuits or those kinds of things, right? The higher your net worth goes, the more and more time you have to sacrifice to becoming an expert in those things. And again, it's not only about those things, it's about taking advantage of that biggest cost of all, which is opportunity cost. You got to be constantly researching, hey, I'm going from a $100,000 net worth to a 10, eventually $100 million net worth. Like, I'm going to go from being denied every financial product I'm offered to being offered every single financial product out there. Now I got to figure out which one is not only good, but which one's the best. Because the good one might make me $1 million, but the great one might make me $5 million. And so all of a sudden, you're sacrificing more and more time. And most people I work with personally think they want to go that route until they start going that route. And then they realize the second option is they can put in the capital. Hey, I kind of got this Bitcoin thing to buy my time back. I'm going to spend it with my kids, my business, whatever. I think I'm going to hire the lawyer or the asset protection person to help me with that. And then I think I'm going to hire this person to help me with that. I need a team around me. If this Bitcoin thing's actually my family's citadel, I need somebody guarding the gates, and I don't necessarily want to be standing guard 24/7. And really, these are the only options. And I think that a lot of us here in Bitcoin haven't, and I know people here in this room, I think we understand it much more because we've seen this much more anecdotally with individuals, but most people I talk to in Bitcoin just haven't put together the pure thought experiment, right? There's 500,000 or so whole coiners in the world. maybe a million, maybe 100,000, whatever. Let's say it's 500,000. There's 8 billion people in the world. The very real question is, okay, what percentage of the world are malicious actors? Is it 10%? Probably not. That's a little high. I'm much more optimistic on the world than that. But if it's 1%, that's 80 million people. If it's a tenth of a percent, if it's 1 in 1,000 people, that's 8 million folks. And so if 1 out of 1,000 people in the world are a malicious actor, that means for every single whole coiner, with just one coin, there's potentially up to 16 people out there in the world that full-time, nonstop are going to try to figure out how to take your Bitcoin. Whether that's with a $5 wrench or a court or a lawsuit or whatever the case, they're going to try to figure it out and they're going to use whatever tools they have at their disposal. Even if 999 out of 1,000 people are perfect unicorn rainbow people that would never try to steal your Bitcoin, right? And so the point is, these are really the only two viable options, because the third option is that you are going to lose your Bitcoin. That is the only option. And so I have this conversation with people all the time. I know that many people in this room do as well, but I think this is really important to hammer home for people. Nothing is free. We are in Bitcoin, proof of work. We should understand that. And people so often are debating if they want to do option 1 or option 2, that by default they're entering into option 3. And I see this so often, all the time, and it's horrendous. And that's why I'm so glad these kinds of events are happening, and this is the first annual one. I hope that this becomes an annual thing, that maybe even a quarterly thing down the line, because I would rather see more Bitcoin be kept in the hands of Bitcoiners and less in the hands of governments or tax agents or vile, disgusting people that will use whatever means possible, the 1 in 1,000, so to speak. So, with that said, people can put in the time if they want. There's plenty of free resources out there. They can do that. But I'm going to talk here about option 2. If somebody says, hey, you know, I've graduated to the point where this is getting to be so much work, I don't want to do this all on my own anymore, what are the only 3 options? Well, the first option is they could hire somebody, pay them by the hour. The second option is they could hire a company, and they get a set of products, or they get a tier structure, or there's, whatever, and they pay by the product. And the third is a paid by results, or a percentage basis kind of model, right? And so just to, there's nothing wrong with any of these 3 models. I use all 3 of these, various times for various reasons. But the point is that just taking an average beginning person that has never had to think about significant wealth planning, this is the exact same kind of framework I talk them through. It's like, hey, knowledge is more important. These are the only options. Pay the time, pay the capital, or lose your Bitcoin, right? And so if you want to buy your time back, these are the only options. You can work with somebody where their incentive model is book more hours with you. You can work with somebody where their incentive model is upgrade to the next tier, or you can work with somebody where their incentive model is help you get as much Bitcoin over the longest period of time possible. So why people pay for me and why people pay for lots of services that are offered in this room here is because every single year you and your respective team is gaining knowledge faster than that individual is going to be able to, right? If you have 5 people on your team's getting 5 years of experience for every year that passes for your client. If you have 100 people on your team, you're getting 100 years of experience. Now, of course, paper pushing does not necessarily mean more, right? There's a quality aspect as well, not just the time. But the point is that for me, this is why I joined the team, and something that a lot of people say to me, oh, well, you work with Peter and Bitcoin buyers and all that, right? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, when are you going to go beyond the next step and have your own practice? So I'm like, I don't want to do my own practice. I love our team. And the whole value is the network effect, right? Every year I get the benefit, the consolidation of 40 years of effort from everybody on the team that is having these conversations. And so the same thing is true on a greater or smaller scale with every single business, every single service offering in the room here. And so effectively, the whole business model is let's work with people to consolidate a large amount of information into a small amount of applicable knowledge that gets them the end desired goal in the first place, which is end up with more Bitcoin. And the fastest way to end up with more Bitcoin is to secure the Bitcoin you have. I see this all the time. I'll be talking to somebody like, Luke, I'm so pumped. I got to 1 Bitcoin. I'm going to 2, or ideally 2.1, right? I'm going to have 1 in 10 million coins. Like, this is awesome. I'm like, okay, great. So what's the story here? Well, it's on PayPal, or it's on Venmo, or it's on Coinbase, or Binance, or Robinhood, or whatever, right? And I always explain. It's like, I know it's not the sexy thing. It's not the fun thing. It's not the cool thing. But let's secure the one first before we go for coin number 2. A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, right? Just like the Bible says. But a lot of people get stuck with this. And so the reason why I'm framing it this way is because I think everyone in this room agrees that we want to see more self-custody, right? And in my experience, this is the fastest way to help people get to that self-custody goal, is to frame it basically saying, this is the fastest path to get there. If you have that 1 Bitcoin, you're trying to get to 2 Bitcoin, or you have 10, you're trying to get to 15, or 100, trying to get to 150 or whatever, like if you don't secure what you have in hand first, you're going to get within one step of that second goal, and then you're going to be starting from square zero again. If, God forbid something awful were to happen, which once in a while it does, and sometimes it can be really, really catastrophic. So what Bitcoin Advisor and also myself personally encourage is multi-jurisdictional, multi-sig with 0 single point of failure. It's not to say that's the only viable option, but for our clientele, with the kinds of clients that we're working with, and ultimately, which I'll get to in just a moment, the kinds of loan products coming to market and already that are at market, this is the kind of setup that they want. Something that's escrow compatible, where they cannot be rug pulled, and they also cannot rug pull, so to speak, the financier involved here. And also, obviously to my self-interest, but doesn't necessarily mean I'm wrong, I think it's important to have a partner aligned with that person. It's not necessarily affiliated with the given product they're using, but can give them an option of, hey, here's 4 to 8 to 12, and eventually down the line, 100 different product offerings. Let's figure out the best one for you. I think that's something that more and more people are going to want. This next part, I'll breeze through because I think we all are pretty educated on this, but when it comes to those self-custody options and specifically explaining what I mean with multi-jurisdiction, multi-sig with 0 single point of failure, there's only a few options when it comes to how to store your Bitcoin. A lot of people's plan is basically, hey, I got Bitcoin, but my spouse, my kid, my grandkid, my niece, my nephew, whatever, they don't really know what they're doing, so I got my brother, or I got my friend, or I got this guy from the Bitcoin meetup, or I got my lawyer, or I got my whomever that's going to help me with that. At the end of the day, your BFF, or your brother, or your neighbor, whoever, is effectively the JP Morgan for your wife and your kids, right? You're putting 100% of your trust in them. And maybe that's fine right now if a portfolio is in the 5, 6, or 7 figures, but in my experience, when people actually think about, oh, what about when Bitcoin's $500,000, 5 million, 50 million? There is a price point where this no longer will make sense, where they're putting 100% of that counterparty risk in a familial or friendship relationship, right? Because not only is there the trust dynamic, but also there's the tech competency question. There's, again, the legal question, everything else I was getting to earlier. So in my opinion, that's not a viable option. The other option, of course, is single sig, which is not a bad option at all. I much prefer single sig to exchanges or even ETFs. But at the end of the day, for the vast majority of individuals, we're talking about multi-generational levels of wealth. That's not exactly what they prefer. What I see happen is because people that have 100% of their wealth in a single sig setup, what I see people trend towards is they say, well, let's say I got 30 Bitcoin, and 30 Bitcoin, when it was $1,000 or $30,000. Well, now that's a lot more than $30,000, right? I'm a little nervous about that. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 10 Bitcoin and put it here. I'm going to take 10 more, put it there, right? But the problem, in my opinion, the problem I see with this is that really you've not reduced the single point of failure. You've just transitioned the kind of single point of failure you had. You had a single point of failure of 100% of your wealth in one location. Now you have 3 single points of failure, each with 33% of your wealth in 3 different locations. You've not reduced the single point of failure. You've simply taken a large one, split it up into 3, it still adds up to 100%, right? You have increased the odds of losing a third of your wealth while decreasing the odds of losing all of your wealth. So net, it's relatively comparable. Now, of course, what a lot of people do is they do a collaborative multi-sig arrangement where they have a majority of keys or chroma keys, and then they have a family member or a product offering or a company holding the other key, right? And there's nothing wrong with this setup either. I think this is a fantastic setup, and this is one that I think is still in its infancy days very early on. Of course, for a lot of people, the perceived emotional hurdle when they adopt this kind of setup is still the underlying question of what happens if something happens to me and now my spouse has the majority of keys. Like, what do I do? Do I tell them where the keys are when I'm alive, or do I not tell them, right? What do I do? I think a lot of people still have a moral or emotional quandary when it comes to this kind of setup. And so, of course, people go from a 2 of 3 to a 3 of 5 to a whatever, or they have perpetually more and more vaults, right? And it's this kind of expansion and contraction of simplicity and complexity going out now. And so what an escrow-compatible, multi-jurisdictional, multi-sig does is it makes that multi-sig possible to have different kinds of financial products with it because it's perceived as the most insurable and lowest risk kind of custody setup. And so where I think we're going is I think most people in Bitcoin are going to have some allocation to KYC Bitcoin and some kind of multi-sig arrangement, and probably some other allocation to some non-KYC Bitcoin and some kind of single sig. I think that we're going to see a bifurcation of this self-custody Bitcoin. I think very few people are going to want to have Bitcoin that is simultaneously KYC'd and multi-sig. If we really believe that 98, 99, 99.5% of the world is never ever going to be able to afford a UTXO, then I think it makes sense to say every single UTXO someday is going to be a significant amount of wealth, and therefore I don't know why anybody in a long enough time horizon is going to want to have an overlap. I think that Bitcoiners will diversify in those two kinds of directions. That may be wrong, but that's at least so far what I've been seeing, and that's my guess as to where we're going. So an example with the Canadian trucker convoy, if somebody had a multi-sig, let's say they were Canadian, right? Let's say they were in Canada, let's say they had a key in the US, and let's say they had one outside the US, Australia, Singapore, Cayman Islands, or whatever. There could be somebody that would knock on their door and say, hey, we think you're a financial terrorist or moose launderer or whatever, right? And we're going to come after you or something, right? They could hand over their key, not lie under oath, and that government bureaucrat, official, police officer, whoever, would have a really hard time going to the other jurisdictions, trying to go through their court systems, pass those duress clauses, and then getting the Bitcoin there. And if for whatever reason there was a fear of countries colluding, as fast as a Bitcoin transaction can move, you can move a key, a public key, from one country to another. Effectively, this is a way to play jurisdictional whack-a-mole and be moving countries faster than the rate that you can fly to them, right? So this is why I think that more and more financial products are going to be built atop of this kind of self-custodial rails, because you have, just like the Michael Saylor quote from 4 or 5 years ago, you got a bank in Singapore and one in China, one in the US, one in wherever, and the whole quote about, you can F yourself if you push me too far, right? So the larger point here is that the financial products, and that, as I hope everyone here has felt over the last couple of days here on stage, is that they're getting better and better and better. And they're going to get better, and they're going to get better. And pretty soon, most people and most clients of everyone here in this room are going to be overwhelmed with the number of options to them, right? For years, we've been hearing, oh my gosh, Luke, how do I get this kind of product, that kind of product? It's like, well, it's not here yet. Or, well, it's here, but it's really expensive, or this and that, the other. If we give it 5 years or 10 years, like I always say, we have less in common with the near future and the past. Like in 5 years, the number one concern is not going to be, how do I do this? It's going to be, I don't know what to do. Please help me distill 500 options into the 5 best options for me. So anyway, that's a little bit about our business. But the point is that reducing risk is important, but it's not sexy. People don't want to go to self-custody. They want to stick with the exchanges. What I think is the bittersweet opportunity here is that I think as more and more of these financial products come out and more of them require the self-custody component, I think we're going to see an increase in the demand of self-custody, because people don't actually care about the self-custody. They care about the financialization of the products that are offered to them from the low-risk setup, which is self-custody. And this is why I think personally the majority of Bitcoin on-chain in the future is going to be in multi-sig, not single-sig. I think we're near peak single-sig, or maybe not. I don't really know. But if we could just think conceptually, there's maybe 20, 30 million entities that will be able to use on-chain, I think most of them are going to be multi-sig. You're saying you have a couple minutes left? Okay, great. Well, I'll go through the end here, but another reason why I think what I just said is true is because the largest pool of dollars is not anywhere in existence in the world today. It's actually the future. We all know and love this chart, right? But it's not real estate. It's not stocks. It's not the bond market. The vast majority of dollars in existence are in a time-locked schedule set by the US government that nobody really knows or can audit, right? The vast majority of dollars aren't here yet. And so to me, it makes perfect sense that the biggest market for Bitcoin is not refinancing the real estate market. It's not the IRA market. It's not the bond market. The biggest market of all is all of the dollars yet to be released on this horrendous time-locked schedule that the US government has. And so to me, it makes sense that effectively the best idea would be to take money, time travel it back in time, buy Bitcoin cheap. The second best thing you can do is take money from the future, time travel it to the present via debt to buy Bitcoin. So I think all these dynamics is hyper bullish for self-custody. I think it's hyper bullish for multi-sig. It's hyper bullish for multi-jurisdiction multi-sig. And I think, and I know, this is the fastest way to help people increase your stack. So I know I only got a couple minutes left. I know we're all hungry. So I'll go through this really quick. But here are some examples, applicable examples of what I'm talking about and some of the tools that clients of mine or clients of our company in general are using. One of them is a Bitcoin treasury loan. This is new as of this year. It's available exclusively to Bitcoin Advisor clients. But the point is not to say that, oh, this is only available for us, you can't get it, whatever. The point is to say this is what's going to be normal in a couple years. So right now, as an example, this is a Bitcoin-denominated 5% interest loan on a 5-year term with zero margin calls, zero counterparty risk. It's available globally because it's Bitcoin-denominated, not in your local political currency of choice. No monthly payment, no credit score, none of that kind of stuff, right? So this is the kind of thing people are using if they want to be doing some Bitcoin options or some Bitcoin treasury investment or some this and that, whatever, right? A lot of people are saying, hey, I want to play with these options, or hey, I want to invest in this Bitcoin treasury, this and that, the other, but I got a 20, 30, 40% capital gain hit when I do it. This makes that possible. And as long as you think that you're going to make more than 5%, it's something that makes sense. Another option, of course, which many people have talked about over the last couple of days, so I won't get into, is tapping into real estate equity, right? There were very few options a couple of years ago. Now there's a lot of great options. 12 months, 24 months from now, there will be even more options. And so these kinds of things are available now, and I think they're only going to get more competitive in the next couple of years. So that's also something that's available now. Something that's not available yet, but I'm very excited for is basically a signature kind of loan, basically saying, hey, I got whatever, 10, 50, 100 Bitcoin, or let's use dollars, right? I got, let's say, $10 million of Bitcoin. It's in this multi-sig. I want $1 million of cash. I'm going to live on 500 grand the next couple of years, put 500 grand more into Bitcoin. Like, Mr. Bank, can you just give me the loan? I don't want to give up any of my collateral. Like, let's time lock that amount of Bitcoin. I think they're going to be able to say yes. I think they're going to offer basically 0% interest because they're going to expect 1, 2, or 5% of the people taking up these loans to default, right? So I think this is the holy grail, so to speak, of Bitcoin, of multi-sig financialization. Basically, people just take out the loan. They don't pay any interest. They roll it over every couple of years. As long as fiat exists, they keep doing this. And then the time where the dollars die is when the only use case for dollars left is to take out new loans to buy more Bitcoin. So I know I've got like 30 seconds left. Probably I don't have a clock, but I know you want me to wrap up. So applicably, for my kinds of clients, these are the 5 steps that we go through to actually achieve that, whatever, 30 to 100% Bitcoin expansion. The first thing always is knowledge. So many people in Bitcoin, even the Bitcoin maxis that have already moved their 401ks, have already gone all in, have already done all the things, so many of them just have a few things that they want to understand better. And that always, more than talking about the numbers, that always is the first thing, because increasing that knowledge increases conviction, increasing conviction increases allocation, not only from the Bitcoiner themselves, but second most important, from the assets of the family, of the business, of the trust, of whatever. A lot of people still today don't know that certain options are available. I was at a Bitcoin conference last weekend with Larry Lepard, Dave Foley, and a bunch of other people, and Larry and Dave and a bunch of other people there simply were not aware that you could have self-custody Bitcoin within your IRA. Like, these things might seem well known to us, but we are in a bubble of a bubble of a bubble, right? Bitcoin's a bubble, financialization of Bitcoin's a bubble, and we are the cutting edge of the bubble, the professionals in the financialization of Bitcoin, right? So a lot of it is just knowledge of helping people increase their allocation from other kinds of assets in their portfolio. Another one of those is, of course, life insurance, which I don't have time to get into here. The third step, of course, is helping the concentric circle gain consensus with the inner circle, right? Helping the spouse is so important. That every initial call with a client, that is always something that we talk about, frankly, in depth, because the relationship with the spouse is so critical to understand what's the biggest blocker, what's the biggest pain point here, and helping both of them be on the same page, increase their peace of mind, improve the relationship, and yes, get more Bitcoin at the end of the day. So whether it's a spouse, a parent, a child, a neighbor, a church friend or pastor or whatever, or a business, that even if that doesn't directly impact the client and increase stack number, it helps them indirectly gain that Bitcoin exposure in their immediate network. Of course, the Bitcoin loan products, many of which I just ran through at hyperspeed and mentioned. And then, of course, the other thing, too, which is the least exciting of these 5, but still really important, is the asset protection, preventing loss, preventing a lawsuit, preventing those kinds of things. You want to be in a kind of setup where you have self-custody, where and I've seen this a couple times here, but you don't want to be put in the position where you either have to lie under oath or give up your Bitcoin. Thinking ahead and protecting yourself against being put in tight spots, in some instances, and in many instances is even more important than preventing those negative things in the first place. So in conclusion, and finally wrapping up, those are only 3 options. Put in the time, put in the capital, whomever that is with, or the only third option is to lose your Bitcoin. So don't default to option 3. Nothing is free in life. And this is the wonderful trade-off of Bitcoin go to the moon technology. So thank you everybody for your time, and what a wonderful event. Thank you for letting me close. I appreciate it. Thanks.